Hey everyone, Barfield here. Welcome to Writer's Corner. Yes, another sleeveless shirt. It's getting really hot here in Utah. It's like 80 degrees every day. It's so nice. I'm going to the park all the time now, and it's just getting warmer, and I love it. But also, now that it's getting warmer and everything is coming back to life, my allergies are acting up like crazy. But recently, in addition to going outside, I've been playing games more with my brothers, which has been awesome, but I've been doing less work, so it's kind of a double-edged sword there. But after all of that amazing game playing, I still have to do some work, which means I have to do a video. I was wondering, what could I possibly do for a video? And then I was like, hey, I haven't talked about villains and death in a while, so now seems about as good a time as any. So today I'll be talking about how you do backstories for your villains. Now in this video I'll be covering some of the different reasons why you're going to want backstory, effective ways you can backstory, and then pitfalls to avoid whenever you are doing the origin story for your villain. So there are a few different reasons why you would want to give your villain a backstory, besides it just being really fun. But the first one is probably because you want to inform your reader of your villain's motives or reasons. The second reason why you'd want to have backstory for your villains is to help create sympathy for this villain. This isn't necessary all the time, but it is useful in creating a more well-rounded type of character, and you want your villains to be more well-rounded. You want to put just as much effort and energy into the antagonist as you do the protagonist. So giving your villain a backstory that creates sympathy can actually be really great, because if we understand what this villain went through and how they got to where they were, and that they weren't always a bad person, it makes this villain seem all the more real and can be much more terrifying. And besides just having a terrifying and realistic villain, there's also a third purpose behind creating a backstory for your villain, and that's a sense of completion. Whenever we know this villain's origin story and how they came to be, it makes this story overall feel more complete. However, it's not just enough to know that you need a backstory, but also how to effectively give your villain origins, because this is where it's your villain's time to shine. The spotlight is on them. You can't screw up here, so you need some effective ways to go about this. An important lesson to remember is that you don't have to reveal the backstory all at once. You can do it in stages and increments over the course of the whole story or series if you feel like. We don't oftentimes understand all of the machinations and motives for the villains just at the very beginning. We want that to be spread out. We want to kind of have a little bit of mystery and intrigue. But when you're getting things out in the open, there are 3 great ways to reveal your villain's backstory. First off, dialogue between characters. If your villain evokes a specific emotion or has a specific presence that people notice, then that's probably going to come in dialogue, and it should. Dialogue is a great way to introduce things organically, and that should be taken as a rule of thumb regardless of what you're using dialogue for. But dialogue is a great way to slowly reveal information over the course of the story, or as a way to have connection between 2 characters while they slowly uncover more about each other or something else. It feels more natural that way rather than someone going on a fact-finding mission and then knowing all they need to know. Oh, just because I went in the script, now I know how to defeat the evil wizard? Yeah, that's basically how it goes. But think about how you can slowly discover this evil wizard's weakness through tavern dialogue, through meeting other characters, meeting victims of this wizard's ire. There's so many amazing ways to use dialogue, and it's a shame it's oftentimes overlooked. Now, another great way to reveal your villain's backstory is to have your characters investigate this villain. I know, I just kind of talk trash about sending your characters on a fact-finding mission, but this may have its purpose later in the story. Think about in Harry Potter, whenever we start to learn about Voldemort. In the very beginning, it's rumors, it's whispers, it's mumblings. But then over time, we learn that these things that have been told about Voldemort are actually pretty true. They are not over-exaggerated because this person is a terrible being. However, we don't really know much beyond that fear and dread that people have. So, Harry and his gang, over time, find out more and more about Voldemort through their quest for his Horcruxes, and they slowly get closer to him in this way. Taking that as an example, it's a great way to have your characters slowly uncover more. It also is a great plot point for your story. Now, a few things to keep in mind. 1, try and not have this all be too convenient. Oh, conveniently, we discovered the wizard's entire diary in this dank forsaken cave that we had to spend the night in. Try not to do that. Also, require some actual investigation or thoughts. Many times whenever people go on investigations to try and find things out about villains, we oftentimes overlook the actual brain power that takes to uncover all of these clues. You as the writer may know every single step of the way of how the villain got there, and may know how all of the clues align, but your characters don't, and neither do your readers. So you need to present a logical way where your characters can piece together all of the clues that they get in a way that makes sense to your readers. And a final great way to reveal your villain's backstory is to follow your villain. Noah, I'm not sure I should be doing this. It kind of seems like a cop-out. I can understand how you may see it that way at first, but following your villain and getting little bits and pieces, maybe even alongside your protagonist's story as well, is a great way to reveal your villain's origins. You can get the villain side of the story at the same time as the protagonist and have them run parallels, or one of my personal favorites, you can have the villain be originally good. You can follow them on their path of corruption. Maybe the overall villain wasn't the villain at first. Maybe they helped stop a first villain, but then they got corrupted by that power and became the overall series antagonist that overall opposes the protagonist, who is their best friend initially. With so many ways to reveal a villain's backstory and so many things to consider, you're bound to have pitfalls whenever you're trying to reveal this character's origins, and that's okay. Here are some common mistakes that a lot of people make, or things that I think you should probably avoid. Flashbacks have their place, but try not to go overboard. Revealing things in visions, dreams, or flashbacks is oftentimes a writer's first knee-jerk reaction to try and give us information as quickly but as awesomely as possible. Try to use flashbacks sparingly, because if you don't, we the readers might see this as a cop-out or just a lazy way to provide us with convenient information. Something else to avoid is creating a backstory that doesn't fit your villain. If your villain is seeking world domination, they probably had really big things in the past that happened to them that made them want this. Or they had a lot of really little things that didn't seem like much until it finally culminated years down the road. Keep in mind the scope of what your villain is trying to achieve and what had to happen to them to make them want to achieve that. If they were 6 and they just lost a candy bar and they're like, man, I'm gonna rule the world so no one can ever drop candy ever again, well, for one, like, that would be kind of great, and we would never have wasted candy. And 2, that doesn't really make sense. Why does your villain have such huge aspirations if something so small happened? Unless you're going to delve into the twisted, warped psyche of your villain and explain it because they were just kind of born this way and this was their mentality, and that was a small trigger. Regardless, having a backstory to fit the villain is incredibly important and should not be overlooked. Now, this whole time I've been talking about villains and backstories, but it's really easy to gloss over one very important factor. And that is, not every villain needs a backstory. We don't always need to know the origins of every antagonist you introduce. The important ones? Yeah, definitely. But the person who tries to mug them, unless they're going to become important later, you probably don't need to know exactly why they did that or their terrible home life or whatever, unless they're going to become an important character. Just like with your protagonists. If someone comes in to aid your protagonist and they never come into the book again, we don't need their whole history. Even if you know it, it's probably not relevant to the story that we're reading, and so we could probably go without it. Now, speaking of all of these histories and backstories and all of that, try to avoid giving your characters the tools to defeat your villain immediately after knowing their history. By this, I mean just because your protagonist knows how the villain came to be doesn't mean they know how to use that information to their advantage. Now, the final thing that I would caution against is being lazy or sloppy. I mean, I would advise against this no matter what you're doing in your writing, but especially whenever you're crafting the backstory of your villain. Remember, we don't get to spend the same amount of time with the antagonist as we do with the protagonist, so having a well-crafted, detailed, possibly clever backstory is a must. Now, I think I've talked about all those evil, dastardly villains enough for today, though I may talk about them more in the future. Though now we move on to the bragging section where I tell you all about my book. My novel, Legendland, this fantastic piece of literature right here, is available on a plethora of places. You can find it on Amazon, iTunes, Barnes & Noble, Smashwords, my publisher's website, and my website, www.arc-storm.com. If you order it off of there, I'll personally sign it for you. Just having my book probably isn't enough for you. I get it, I'm addictive. So stalk me online. Find me on Facebook, Twitter, Wattpad, Goodreads, and obviously on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and comment, because the more you do, the more I like making these videos. And if you're wondering about things that I don't answer in these videos, that's okay. You can contact me. You can comment below and I do my best to respond to every single one of them, or you can go to www.arc-storm, click on the little contact button, and as long as it's not deeply personal or spam, I won't throw it in the incinerator, and I'll actually give you a response. So I hope you've taken all this information to heart, that you feel free to subscribe, comment, contact me, and follow me wherever you feel like, and also that you continue to enjoy.